KoshienCast, the world's best and only sports anime fan podcast. My name is Matt, and joining me today is a very special guest, Matt.
Hello.
Hey, thanks for joining me today, Matt.
Oh, I'm so glad to be here.
Well, as you may be already aware of, we are covering week 5 of the fall season. That would be all sports anime airing between October 30th and November 5th. So I think we are going to jump right into it with our current new format with Yuri on Ice.
Yeah, so I'll just go ahead like we did last week. I think it worked pretty well where I do the summaries for all the shows except Keijo. So
Yes.
I'll just start it off here with Yuri on Ice. So they pretty much jump right into the new tournament structure. Last week they alluded to the fact that he's going to be going through a couple tournaments, and they start with the first one, which is effectively the Japanese figure skating nationals. Um, Yuri gets reintroduced to his Japanese quote-unquote rival character, Minami. Yuri forgets who he was, and Minami gets pissed. Then Yuri finds out that he has to perform first in the first round, and he's sad about that. They cut ahead to the competition itself, and Yuri is nervous, but then Victor comes over and hugs him from behind and tells Yuri that he needs to seduce him with his performance and be a beautiful pork cutlet bowl. So that helps. And Yuri gets a good audience reaction during his performance. He ends up getting a personal best in his score. And then Minami performs as well. He ends up being frustrated that Yuri didn't watch because he thinks of Yuri as like an idol of his. Then they go to the second round, which is the free skate or the longer skate. Um, Yuri again is anxious, but Victor calms him down by applying chapstick to his lips with his fingers. And then Yuri performs his long routine, but he upgrades the difficulty of the routine while he's doing it without asking Victor's permission. He makes a few mistakes, but also impresses everyone with his audacity. He ends up winning the competition overall, and Minami is very impressed by Yuri's audacity. They end up coming to terms and having a very cordial discussion. At the end of the episode, Yuri announces that his theme for the Grand Prix season is going to be love, because Victor is the first person he's ever felt he wanted to hold on to. He doesn't have a name for the emotion he feels towards Victor, but he decides to go with love.
Yeah, that really felt like a cop out, but also, I mean, unfortunately, you just can't really get away with saying that you're gay in an anime without it immediately being typecast as being shown an eye.
Right.
So,
But I mean, and that's what we've said the whole time.
yeah,
So I think this it reinforced a lot of things here.
right.
I don't know how
Um,
much new ground it broke, but why don't you just start off with your overall impressions?
I liked it. This episode felt a little bit more all over the place.
Yeah.
I got a little confused by the timeline here. Because so I didn't understand whether time was skipping in between the two different competitions, or like if we were skipping between like different months, or if we were,
What do
or
you?
if this was like supposed to be the same day.
Yeah, I think it was supposed to be 2 days.
Okay, yeah, that's because generally the show has been pretty good about showing the transition from day to day, and they kind of didn't really do that this time, or maybe I just missed it, and while I was taking my notes or something. But I felt like it didn't really feel quite all the way there. Like there's this moment where Victor gets really mad at Yuri because he's like apparently not being supportive because he wasn't watching Minami, and I didn't really
Yeah,
quite understand where that was coming from.
it did seem random. There was a recurring thing in this episode with Victor critiquing Yuri for a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
That one, in the first, after his first routine, he critiqued him for basically his execution on jumps. But in this one, before his second routine, he critiqued him for, it, basically he said that if you can't motivate someone else, how can you yourself be motivated?
Right.
Which
And I did. Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say it's funny because even Yuri didn't understand what he meant by that. He's like, well, now I'm not motivated. Like you just made me demotivated. Like what's wrong with you? So I don't know if it was necessarily something that was supposed to be super clear or just like Victor being weird and Russian. You know?
Right. And to be fair, I did like how that had his comment about how if you can't motivate somebody else, how can you motivate yourself? I liked the payoff at the end of the episode where he very proudly and boldly proclaims that he's going for the gold.
Yeah.
In the Olympics, and I thought that was a very nice character
Not the
development
Olympics.
Oh, sorry, yeah, at the Grand Prix.
Right.
Yeah, my bad. Sorry.
It's okay.
But yeah, I did appreciate that, and I thought that was I thought that was some character development, and that was very well earned, and was very satisfying to see. And I can kind of complain about that, but God, I still love watching these skating matches. I'm
Well,
sorry,
yeah, I
but
mean the routines themselves are worth it, and the to the episode director's credit, there was a lot of just extended sequences of routines. So you
right,
got to see most of both Yuri's routines, and you
yeah,
got to see Minami's routine. You got to see his long routine.
yeah, and
Um,
I really appreciate how she's able to really make that both like all of the routines feel very distinct.
oh yeah,
And I really appreciated watching Minami's like how different it felt with like the tap dancing routine, like in the middle of like an ice skating. Like I didn't realize that was even possible to do.
yeah. No, that
Like,
was fun to see. Um,
um,
I also appreciate just the way that they animate Yuri. So when you see him fall over, you can see that he sort of is over twisting. You can tell which jumps are executed well and which ones he barely pulls off because some
right,
look smoother than others. It felt like there was a lot of nuance placed into his execution.
right.
I don't know. I have no
I
complaints about the figure skating itself.
Oh yeah, well because there were two moments in particular I wanted to bring up is like during Yuri's first performance, I really liked the way that they kind of make you feel the tension during that because that the whole point of that is that Yuri is really trying to like pull off this routine well,
Yeah.
and they kind of help you feel the tension because Yuri's kind of narrating what he's doing and it's going just like a beat too fast
Mm-hmm.
compared to like what he's actually doing in the routine. So there's kind of this constant tension between trying to listen to what he's saying and actually like watching and making like seeing what he's doing.
Yeah. Is he actually gonna pull off what he thinks he's gonna pull off?
Yeah, like what he thinks he's doing in the moment. And I thought this was that really helped you like just feel like what it feels like to do that in the moment, trying to keep track of both like mentally keeping track of what you're trying to do and then actually like the actual performance of it.
Right. Yeah. I don't
And,
know. The execution of his first routine was interesting because like Victor said during that period that he was too stiff, he was too focused on the
right.
mechanics, but he wasn't really living. Because Victor's whole thing with Yuri is that he makes the music come alive, that he sort of draws you in. But if he's just focused on technique and the mechanics of his jumps, then that's not actually that engaging, and that doesn't capitalize on what makes Yuri a special skater.
Right. And yeah, and I think that kind of helped as well because I think during that doing it like portraying the scene like that helped us kind of understand where Victor is coming from in that regard because again we're not really paying attention so much to like the routine as we are just trying to make sure that it's working.
Right.
The other moment I wanted to bring up as well, what did you think about the face slam?
Oh my gosh, that was amazing.
Oh my god, I gasped. I actually like audibly gasped when that happened.
Yeah.
Um,
So do you want to just set up what happens?
yeah, basically during Yuri's second routine, I didn't really want to pause it, so I didn't get a good glimpse of like the shots that lead up into it. Because I was just kind of mesmerized by the
Yep.
performance.
Same.
But it's such a graceful performance, and then like all of a sudden you just see Yuri slam his face into the wall. And I was so caught off guard by something just so brutal in the middle of like just something so graceful and like just pleasant to look at. And it's like, and you get a close up shot of this face slam, like, so you really get to see how his face just gets mashed into the wall. I mean, he comes out fine, of course, but it really worked well for the shock value of just how just brutal that was.
Well, what I liked about it was the same thing I liked about his mistakes earlier in the routine, is that they were a product of him trying to overextend himself. Like he didn't want to
Right.
compromise on the difficulty of his routine. He wanted to be able to really impress Victor with what he was able to do.
Right. Yeah,
Um,
and I mean, but I like how he still manages to pull it off in the end. I mean, I know that's kind of like, oh yeah, Yuri pulled it off. I mean, no big deal. Like nobody's really surprised about that. But uh, yeah, I kind of like the fact that that his performance is like just so good that he's able to still pull off such a strong like score, even with that just clear and obvious like misstep.
yeah, I don't know. The thing I guess I ultimately liked about it was that it felt like all he wasn't just messing up because of the random need to have a character fail.
Right.
It was building all of his success and all of his failure actually built into the narrative about his relationship with Victor.
Yeah, yeah.
So it wasn't just there to be there to create tension of like, ooh, is he gonna lose, whatever. So do you want to before we move on, do you want to sort of discuss the state of the Yuri Victor relationship?
Yeah, I actually kind of did want to bring that up because I thought this episode did some very interesting, subtle things to start showing up. Even though that they're getting a lot closer, it also kind of set up some things that feel like there may be a little bit more tension later on.
Yeah.
There was a line that really got me in this episode, which was so there's a section during Yuri's second routine where he's supposed to be show. This is supposed to be portraying the moment where Victor first came into his life and they were first starting to get to know one another.
Mm-hmm.
And Victor actually points out, like, you don't look like you're enjoying this, and he seems very confused by this. And I feel like this is going to lead to an interesting moment of self-reflection for Victor because he doesn't actually understand what the nature of their relationship is.
What do you mean?
Like, well, because he doesn't seem like Victor just sort of assumes that Yuri was just thrilled to always have him around.
Oh
Like
yeah.
he's finally getting to know his idol, and so he seems surprised by the fact that in Yuri's routine he's kind of portraying this as actually being kind of a conflicting emotion for him
Hmm.
because you can also see that early on in those episodes that yeah, he's excited to have him there, but he's also kind of terrified by that prospect.
Yeah.
And I think Victor is starting to understand that a little bit more now.
Hmm. Yeah,
Uh,
it's like you wonder if moving forward there'll be an issue of sort of a balance of power in their relationship where
right.
one is the worshiper and one is the worshipped. And
Yeah.
at first brush it can seem great for both sides because like Yuri's like, oh, I get to be around my idol, great. And Victor's like, oh, someone idolizes me, great. But over time that's a very imbalanced relationship, and you wonder whether that might create a rift.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I like that they're kind of planting the seeds now
Yeah, and so
rather
there's
than
no
just throwing at us
actual
later.
right. There's no actual conflict per se, um,
Right.
but
But we're
it's
just
there.
starting to see the seeds of that doubt. And I thought it was interesting though as well because I kind of chuckled at Yuri's behind the back hug. I kind of appreciated how like weirdly tender that was of Victor.
Yeah, he didn't. He definitely didn't have to do that, but he knew what Yuri needed in that moment.
Right, and it
Um,
was kind of it kind of took me off guard a little bit because like, Victor has always come off as being just a little bit too overly happy. So kind of seeing him kind of like actually give something that Yuri maybe needed at the moment was, it came off as very tender to me. I don't know.
yeah. So the other thing we saw in this episode regarding those two was basically that they were very affectionate with each other
Right.
throughout, and a lot of other people reacted to that. So there was a couple instances. It was like we talked about the hug before the first skate. Then before the second routine, like I said, Victor put chapstick on Yuri's lips, and then they hugged for a while.
Right.
And then at the end, when he declared that, he felt so emotionally supported by Victor in a direct, not abstract way for the first time, and that the only
Right.
word he could use to describe it is love. And a lot of people just sort of, in all three instances, people were taken aback by it.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to see. What makes that interesting for me is that earlier on in the show, they pretty much all of their interactions that you could describe as romantic were private interactions or with only a couple people.
Right.
These are all public interactions, and people are reacting in a way that would make them say like, "Oh, well, that's unexpected. Oh, wait, is that a romantic?" They're reacting
Right.
in a way that they're taken aback at the romantic nature of how it sounds or how they're acting, which
Right.
is interesting because it makes it more difficult to write off that subtext to
Yeah.
the show.
Yeah, exactly. Like, the series is acknowledging at this point, yeah, these two are definitely more than just coach and
Mm-hmm.
athlete. Like,
Yeah.
there is something, like, the series is actively addressing their relationship, which is not something we ever really see in series like
Well,
this.
yeah. I mean, how many times do people need Victor to say, "Go out there and seduce me, Yuri," for them to think that there's something more to their relationship?
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, I'm just saying.
I know. I mean,
I,
obviously, we were both convinced relatively early on, but what's interesting is that the show keeps re-acknowledging it when it doesn't. It
yeah.
could keep it less.
They could keep it coy, basically. They
Exactly.
could keep it just as a knowing wink to the audience, but
Mm-hmm.
they're actually kind of keeping it at the forefront.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which I think is impressive. Anyway, do you want to move on to Haikyu?
Oh, yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so Haikyu episode 5. It starts off. Shira Torizawa just lost the second set. Their setter, Shirabu, blames himself, knowing that he was basically tricked by Suki. And so we see a flashback at the beginning of the episode of Shirabu in junior high. He saw Shira Torizawa junior high playing volleyball, and he saw Ushiwaka and decided from there that he wanted to go to Shira Torizawa so that he could play the kind of volleyball that depends on the strength of the spikers instead of the ingenuity of the setters like him. Then it pretty quickly they go back to the present, and you see that Karasuno lost the third set. They lost the third set by 7 points, just like that. And so Karasuno tries to regroup and focus on moving as a team, mobbing on the spikers, and so Suki tries to reorient the blocking strategy so that Ushiwaka is forced to spike directly at Nishinoya. Um, and then, sort of towards the end, Karasuno is able to keep up in the fourth set, but they can't actually break away. The score is pretty much even. And at one point, Ushiwaka criticizes Hinata for being able to do anything other than spike, because he's too short, but he can't actually block, he can't actually receive. Um, so in response, uh, Hinata discovers on the floor, he discovers a running block where he basically runs with the same momentum that he would to do a spike, but instead he just jumps and does a block. He manages to block Ushiwaka and take the lead. And that's pretty much the end of the episode. I think it's something like 12-11 in the fourth set at the end of the episode.
Right.
So that what were your big takeaways for this one, Matt?
First of all, what did you think about the fact that they just skipped the third set?
Yeah. They showed like the first couple points, and then they did a flashback, and then it was over. I don't know. It was weird.
Right? Like, we have a 10 episode season devoted to like this entire match. Now,
Mhm.
I realize that they can only do whatever the manga actually has the content of,
Mhm.
but I'm really taken aback by how we are halfway through the season and we are already nearing the final set here.
Yeah.
So I guess it displayed a lot of confidence. I wasn't sure how I felt about it. At the same time, though, I guess we don't really need to see every moment-to-moment beat of the third set.
Right.
So, in a way, I do kind of appreciate that they did skip it.
Yeah,
because the important thing is,
yeah, it'll be interesting because I think what we're going to see here is the strategy that Karasuno takes on the next level in order to come back and win. Because Karasuno has to win the fourth set.
Right. Like, if they lose the fourth set, then the season is over.
Right, exactly.
So, yeah, I just thought that was kind of interesting. One other thing I did notice about... one of the other things I did notice, there was a line from the bowl cut. What was his name again?
Shirabu.
Shirabu, where he makes a spike, I believe, and it ends up going in, even though they had the blockers there, but they managed to block it. Or something like that, but it still goes in. And he says something very goofy like, "You're only an ace if you can create miracles."
Oh, yeah, sorry. That wasn't Shirabu. I missed that character's name. That's like the first year who wants to replace Ushiwaka.
Oh, my bad.
But yeah. Okay, go ahead.
Something I really appreciate about Shiro Torizawa, I was kind of expecting the entire team to be like a group of Ushiwakas.
Yeah.
Like, based off of his personality, being like, everybody on my team is like me, or like, they have my same kind of power, as he was saying in like the last season. So I kind of appreciate the fact that Shiro Torizawa is made up with a bunch of other goofballs.
Yeah, that's kind of the funny thing you see with a lot of lazier sports shows is that they will have one central character on a team and then everyone else will be variations on that same character.
Right.
As if everyone who goes to one high school is, super serious and has a low voice and doesn't have feelings like Ushiwaka. But of course that's ridiculous. But it's very easy to just sort of create opponent teams and make them very uniform so that they're easy to remember. But this isn't doing that, thankfully.
Yeah, they're actually like going into each of these characters and giving them a pretty distinct personality.
Yeah.
The other thing I kind of wanted to adjust, we've already gone on and on about their animation in this series. But something I wanted to point out about, like, I really appreciate how lively these matches feel. Or how this match feels. Like, there's a moment when Tendo spikes the ball, and, like, nobody's able to get it. It's, like, not even close. But off to the side, you see Azumane diving for the ball. Like, you didn't need to throw that, like, little detail of somebody trying to even, like, catch it.
Yeah.
Right? Like, any other series, like, without, like, the same budget, or like the same level of animation as Haikyu, you could easily get away with not showing like the team even able to catch the ball or even attempting to in a shot. But I appreciate the level of detail that they go into with just every single hit that they're able to portray. Because it really helps the matches feel very alive and like an actual match.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's going to be one of the biggest strengths when you look back on what did Haikyu do is that it had great animation, but it also had consistent animation. Because a lot of shows, as we've discovered, have great animation in the first couple episodes, but they can't actually sustain it over a season.
Right, because they kind of want to make the first episode to be their big, like...
It's a showcase.
This is the showcase. This is what is going to get people to watching the show, and then we can kind of start cutting corners later once we get the people hooked in.
Yeah.
Maybe at the end we'll save some of the budget so that we can go over and like make the final scenes look pretty good.
Yeah.
But
yeah, so go ahead. I just want to see if you have any like big takeaways from episode 5.
Other than that, okay, so this isn't necessarily from episode 5. This is something that I've actually kind of noticed with every single episode. It's a very, very, very small complaint. But it's something that... It kind of takes me just a little bit out of the moment, and it was especially noticeable in this episode. So, towards the end of the episode, we basically have this soaring, like, vocal chorus theme going over this dialogue about the like basically like the fate of volleyball as we know
Yeah.
it, right? And then the episode cuts away, and all of a sudden we're treated to like this jaunty theme music that's like, gonna play volleyball with my best friend,
Yeah.
gonna have lots of fun in the sun.
Yeah.
It just, I mean, I know, like, it's just the ending theme, and I know, I've looked online, a lot of people really like it, it's fine, but just this like, everything that's being portrayed like in these episodes, just the sheer level of desperation
Mm-hmm.
and like passion, like through all of the players, and then kind of cutting to this weird little jaunty music, it does kind of take me out of the moment a little bit.
Yeah, that's legit. I guess I don't know. I think I guess I never thought about it, but it really doesn't connect with the tone of the rest of the show. The thing it
Right.
connects with is the imagery of seeing all the different volleyball teams from across the series all playing together and being happy. I think on some level it's just fan material to be like, hey, look at all the
Yeah.
shipping you can do with this,
That was almost exactly what I was thinking. It serves almost as a reminder. It's like, okay, we gotta get some we gotta rile up the fan base, get some
Hmm.
merchandising
And you got to
opportunities in here.
remind people of all the other characters because this series only features two teams. So you got to remember
Right.
all the cute boys on the other teams.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, Oikawa did show up here towards the
True.
end, but yeah, but I mean, it was a decent episode.
Yeah, it was
It
good. It wasn't as good as last week, but whatever.
yeah, yeah, I know. It's kind of. I feel like we're still building up to something.
Yeah, I do too. So speaking of something that was built up, do you want to move on to March Comes In Like a Lion?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, so this was an interesting episode. Basically, it focused on flashbacks to Ray's past.
Right.
So there was a lot of setups. Basically, the conceit was Ray would go about his business during his normal day, and then something would remind him of his past, and he would have a flashback. And this happened like 3 or 4 times. So instead of going through the setups, which don't really matter, it's just him hanging out with Momo.
Right.
I'm just gonna describe the flashbacks that he had. Um, it starts off when Ray's pretty young. I think he's supposed to be in about third grade, and he's playing shogi with his father's friend Koda. And I guess his father used to be a professional shogi player, Ray's father, and then Koda played with him, and Koda is a professional shogi player. So Ray is awkward and doesn't get along with any other kids, but he really enjoys playing shogi with Koda. And it's not that he even likes shogi; it's just that he likes being talked to like an adult and being
Right.
respected. Um, then they flash forward to Ray getting back from a school trip, and his mom and his dad and his little sister all died because they got in a car accident with a drunk driver. Um, Ray's aunt wants to give him over to an orphanage because she doesn't want to take care of him, but instead, Ray's father's friend Koda decides to take him in on with the understanding that he will be his apprentice in shogi. So Ray lies and says he likes shogi because he wants somewhere to live with someone he likes. Uh, then they move forward. Again, they flash forward, and Ray is dealing with his new adoptive siblings. So there's Koda's daughter, Kyoko, who is 4 years older than Ray, is very violent, and she ends up hitting Ray every time Ray beats her in shogi. And then Koda has another son named Ayumu, who is the same age as Ray, who's very shy. And basically, Ray keeps developing. He refers to Koda as his father, and it gets Kyoko very angry. And then he Ray basically forces Ayumu to quit shogi because he can't keep up with him. Ayumu gets depressed and like stops leaving his room and basically becomes a NEET. And then later on, Ray wins an amateur tournament, and he does so by defeating his adoptive sister Kyoko. And then Koda forces Kyoko to stop playing shogi because if she can't even beat Ray, she'll never be a pro. So what's the point? And then she starts gallivanting around and being irresponsible. By the end of the episode, Ray but gets under the impression that he's an imposter and that he shouldn't be in their house, and that the only thing he's done is destroy his adoptive family from within. So that's what prompts him to move out on his own, live by himself, and not ruin their lives anymore, and just become a professional shogi player, not because he loves it, but because he can be independent financially if he does it and stop ruining his adopted family's life.
Yeah, so there's a lot I want to talk about this episode, and I have no idea where to start.
Okay, well, just start wherever. We'll see where it takes us.
So I just wanted to say, because I almost wanted to interject there, like when you were talking about how Kyoko was basically forced to stop playing shogi.
Yeah.
So the father there, there's a really powerful line there where the father very calmly goes, "So you understand, right, Kyoko?" And Kyoko is like clearly in like she is clearly distraught.
Yeah.
Her like it looks like her world is destroyed almost.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but
Like
she's
that
bawling.
her father.
Yeah.
Yeah, she is bawling. Like she, I even wrote my notes. It's like, do you understand, right, Kyoko? It's like clearly she does not understand.
Yeah, exactly. She's begging you not to do that.
Right, she is begging you not to do that while also like just not outright saying it.
Yeah.
And I love the way that this father is portrayed as being this very complicated individual, essentially, because he's very good to Ray. He is very much he's very fatherly to Ray, I
Yeah.
feel like.
Yeah.
But he doesn't seem to understand his own children and what they want.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting too because yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing more flashbacks and hopefully more present stuff with him, because it seems like he doesn't think that he's forcing his kids to play shogi.
Right.
But his kids all believe, and Ray included, all believe that the only way he'll love them is if they're good at shogi.
Right.
So that's kind of interesting, the way that he's like, well, yeah, just quit. Like, this isn't, if you're not naturally suited to it, it's not going to be easier. That's fine. Just quit. Like, you need to quit and move on to something else. But
Right.
so he thinks he's doing them a favor. But
Right.
Kyoko realizes, like, oh no, I'm being shut out.
Right, exactly. It's like he thinks he's being a very supportive father here.
Yeah.
But he doesn't seem to actually understand that what his kids want, like that his kids, like there's a really interesting scene where Ray like calls this guy, I forget what his name is, but I'm sure you have it in the
What,
notes.
his father?
Yeah, Coda.
Coda, yeah.
Yeah, where Coda, like, where Ray refers to Coda as father at the dinner table, and he's like, "Would you like any more, father?"
Yeah.
He's like, "Oh, sure, that's fine." And Kyoko's just like, "Did you just hear what he called you?" It's like, "Well, yeah, it's fine. Like, I asked him to call me that."
Yeah, it would be
Like,
weird
and
for him to call me master, right?
Right, exactly, and he doesn't seem to understand the implication there is that Ray hasn't had to work to get his affection.
Yeah.
And whereas Kyoko clearly feels like she has had to work for this.
Yeah.
And so obviously she's also got like a terrible temperament, but like I like the way that the series is portraying this, what should be a very understandable like mentality that this father is taking, and is showing how that's actually kind of toxic if you don't actually understand the people around you.
Yeah, and if you don't communicate clearly with your kids,
Right.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, even Ray is being destroyed by this because because he's seeing what this is doing, and he's blaming himself.
Yeah. Yeah, he thinks that he's the one who's destroyed their family, which...
Right. And now, I did think that their little comment about... because the way he comes to this conclusion is that he sees this documentary online about this type of bird that goes into nests and lays its own eggs, and basically destroys the other bird's family. And I thought that was a fine way, like, to make him realize that. I didn't appreciate the way the series kept saying, it's like, "That's me."
Yeah.
That's me. It's like, I got the point, guys.
Yeah, how many times does he have to say, "I am that bird. That bird is me"? It's like, okay,
it's like, we got the symbolism, guys. There, it's good symbolism, but we got it. Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was an interesting series of shots at the beginning that I thought was a really interesting way to introduce us to the episode, which is that it basically kind of keeps us out of what's actually going on, and kind of it's an interesting way to drop us into the episode without having to like make it obvious that we're going into flashback mode now, guys.
Right.
And it also kind of connects later on. So we have like this opening shot of a bunch of blue flames, but we don't really know what it is. It feels like this very surreal situation, like almost ethereal. And, it's kind of, like, we don't know at the time that this is supposed to be, like, a hot plate. We just see, like, blue flames in this weird isolated area. And then we cut to the eyes of two unknown figures. We see the glasses, so we assume one is Rei and one is somebody else. And then it kind of, I don't want to go through the entire series of shots, but basically it, we understand at a point we understand that this is now Rei, or that this is the man from the first episode, and then it cuts and we see that it's not actually Rei, but it's the child. Well, I mean, it's child Rei, so it is actually Rei, but a younger version. And that's kind of how it introduces us to knowing that this is something that this is taking into place in the past. And I like it's all sort of building up to this moment of where we have an extreme close-up of Koda's face, where he says, "I lost."
Mm.
And I thought that was an interesting way of introducing us to the episode, because it brings back that feeling that Rei had when he talked about beating his father figure in Shogi before, about how he feels like he beat him. So we're kind of immediately introduced to the theme of this episode by that callback.
Yeah, that is interesting, because that's what he does in the first episode.
Yeah, he beats his father and he feels terrible about it because he feels like he basically just killed him.
Yeah.
And so without actually having to call back to that moment, just by saying by those words in this slow build up to that, we kind of understand that this is the mentality that we're going into with this episode. Like, we're already getting this setup of why Rei feels like this. Like, this is going to be why, this episode is going to be about why Rei feels like that.
Yeah.
So I thought that was a really interesting way to move into it. The other thing as well that I noticed was the blue flames. About the blue flames, there's when we are introduced to the dead bodies of Rei's family, which is a really, like, I felt like goosebumps during that scene.
Oh yeah, it was very unsettling.
Yeah, it was very unsettling because we're in this sort of dark room where we just see these bodies that are hidden underneath a sheet. But it's interesting because the way the scene cuts into that scene is that it's on a single... the lighting of the room makes the candles look blue, and so we are cut into that scene by just a single blue flame.
I didn't notice
so
that.
it's very subtle, like, symbolism here of the initial flames, which are, everything's together, this world, like, Rei's world is complete, to all of a sudden, now we have just a singular flame, all of a sudden Rei is now alone.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that was kind of an interesting connection there between the flames. I'm still kind of wrapping my head about what it fully means, but
yeah.
I thought it was an interesting callback and sort of a symbolism sort of thing.
Yeah, and it's nice the way that it connects the different threads of the episode.
Right.
I think honestly my big takeaway with this was just I was just grateful that there was some meat here. Because the first 4 episodes have all been talking around the situation with Rei. And this one, it felt like it just took it head on. It didn't take much prompting, but they were just like, okay, here's the backstory. It was very much a here's the backstory episode, but it wasn't executed in a lazy way.
Right.
It was still interesting, and you felt like if that had been episode 1, it probably wouldn't have been as interesting. So I guess on some, even though I resented it at the time, I think I needed those first 4 episodes to wonder what the hell is the deal with Rei, in order for me to feel like there was something meaningful about getting it in episode 5.
Right. Like, I know you complained about it at the time, but I really appreciate the way now how they subtly introduced this sort of, like his sexual abuse that we know eventually comes later on.
Mm-hmm.
And this kind of gives us this impression to already shape what we're going to be thinking about this character later on. So, for example, at the time we were thinking, it's like, so was this like his mother or somebody
Yeah,
like that?
we didn't know who it was. He had that short flashback in episode 4 of some kind of sexual abuse. It really wasn't clear. But now we could clearly see by the design that it was his adoptive sister, Kyoko.
Okay.
But we still don't know the context for that.
Right.
So it is interesting.
It is interesting, and it kind of already shapes up how we're supposed to see Kyoko as well, because
Right.
we know she's going to end up doing this terrible thing, but we're already kind of sympathizing with her now, like through her portrayal of this episode.
Yeah, instead of just seeing her, which the scene itself made her just seem like a drunk, right?
Yeah.
Which is on some level what she becomes by his description, but understanding how she got there instead of just throwing you into it, which is nice. Anyway, I thought this really turned the series around for me because I had been sort of cooling on it ever since the first episode, and
Right.
I think this made a lot of difference.
Yeah, I'm glad you're turning around on it, because I know it's funny, because I started off not liking it, and then as we were watching more, I was actually starting to get more into it.
Yeah.
And now I think we're finally at a point where we're both like really into it.
Yeah, I'm into it. I love the shogi. I'm genuinely interested in what each episode does. Um,
Yeah.
so speaking of shows where we've gone up and down, do you want to talk about Scorching Ping Pong Girls?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, give me 1 second. So, Scorching Ping Pong Girls, episode 5. It starts off basically with the setup from last episode where Kirika is doing a series of 20 matches against all the members of the ping pong club. She's defeated all of them so far, and now she has to go up against Agari. So Agari wants to make sure that she can win so that she can get a spot on the roster to nationals. Um, Agari is able to counter Kirika's chop, and she's the first person to be able to counter the chop, but she still can't break through Kirika's defense. Eventually, Agari is forced to switch to using her forehand smash, which she doesn't do very often. And eventually, she's able to get motivated enough to win by wanting to show Koyori what it looks like to grasp victory. So she does. She wins. She scores the first point, and she wins the match. And then it's Koyori's turn to play Kirika, and Koyori also wins the match because she sort of does her traditional thing of enjoying ping pong so much that it makes her opponent enjoy ping pong, and then she wins. After that, they all head home, and they take off their cat ears, except for Hokuto, who wears hers home because of course she does. And then Agari and Koyori promise to each other that they're going to go to nationals together. And then Kirika and Munemune are talking, and they have a flashback to when they were freshmen at the high school, and they similarly promised each other that they would go to nationals together. That's pretty much the episode.
Yeah. So I liked this episode. It was definitely an improvement over last week. I don't know if you
Yeah.
agree or not.
Yes, I mean,
Okay.
it's hard not to be.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, last week was about as bad as it was going to get, I feel
Hopefully.
like.
Hopefully.
Hopefully, at the very least. I guess it could go worse,
Yep.
but so when we started doing this podcast, I think our general intent was to get in, we just wanted to kind of have fun talking about the different tropes of sports anime and stuff like that. I don't think we intended it to become a gender study, but I feel like that's what's become. Yeah, it's kind of getting hard to ignore the Yuri subtext in the series.
Yep.
So, cause this episode was a lot more about. We kind of see the two, I guess, couples getting together. We see that kind of with.
If not 3.
What was that?
If not 3.
Right. Because we have we see a lot more development between Agari and Koyori, because
Yeah.
Agari is getting a lot more assertive with Koyori and getting her to believe in herself. Because she talks about going to nationals, and the way she phrases it, it's not just about like, no, we're going to go do this as a team. She's trying to get Koyori to believe in herself more. She says, like, no, it's not just they are, but you will beat your opponents.
Yeah.
Like, you can do this.
Yeah,
And
there was one exchange. I'm just gonna interrupt briefly, but there's one exchange right before Agari wins her match. She like stops right before she smashes, and she declares out loud. I don't know how she had this much time to make a declaration in the middle of a match, but she says, "Koyori, keep your eyes peeled and watch me." And then she
right.
smashes, and then Koyori decides that she wants to go to nationals with Agari specifically, quote, so I can feel my heart race with you even more. And there's just a lot of her blushing and having her heart go doki doki around
Right.
Agari, like, throughout.
You see, and I kind of thought that was interesting too, because when Agari, because it's really Koyori who has driven Agari to get better at the game. Because the reason she learned beforehand Smash was to face Koyori.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's the same.
Um,
That's another point where Koyori goes all doki doki because Agari apparently wanted to learn the forehand smash so that they could be rivals. And she said
right.
that, and she's like, "Oh, she wants to be rivals with me? Oh my gosh!" Um,
um, Unfortunately, I do feel like, and I think this would be a lot. Again, it comes back to our larger complaint. I don't particularly care for the way that this has been portrayed otherwise,
mhm.
because a lot of the gags about Kirika trying to put cat ears on the girls and her whole breast pillow thing with Mune Mune
Yeah, which
has
she did again in this episode.
which actually I'm going to defend that real quick. That actually that's the other couple that I felt was sort of forming or has already formed,
Yeah,
because her laying on Mune Mune's chest actually felt a little bit. I've been using this word a lot lately, but it felt more tender. It
yeah.
felt more like this was a more comforting thing for Kirika than just, oh, haha, she's gonna lay on her breast.
Well, because
How
it
funny.
wasn't a public display this time.
Right.
So again, the way that this is different from Yuri on Ice for me is that this doesn't feel like it's trying to say anything.
Right.
It just feels like it's Yuri baiting in order to make fanboys fantasize and write fan
Draw
fiction,
dojins.
yeah, draw dojin and fantasize and like buy merch so that they can put together their favorite Yuri pairing, but they'll never
Right.
actually say anything explicit. They'll just talk about how doki doki it makes me to feel around you, whatever that means, right?
Right.
So for me, it's interesting to see where it goes on one level, but on another level, I'm pretty confident that they're doing it cynically and just in a way to go towards the sort of the lowest common denominator otaku, like we were afraid
Right.
they were with their initial character designs.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the problem, is that if it wasn't done with such a male gaze,
Yeah.
I think it would work, because I feel like it's almost there making some interesting commentary.
Hmm.
Like I feel like it's just about there, but again, we have to deal with a lot of this other. We got to sift through a lot of this other crap, and it kind of lessens a lot of the
Which
impact.
commentary do you think it is almost making?
I feel like it's, and I guess that's the thing, is that I don't know. I haven't 100% thought that through yet. It's kind of this whole, like, it's okay to explore, to kind of develop. Uh, like it's like, okay, so again, it's like this sort of type of, like, a lot of these types of series that Ping Pong Girls is drawing, or yeah, it's drawing from. It's stuff like K-On! Or to a lesser extent, I hate to say this because I do like the series, but Melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya,
Yeah.
where you basically have cute girls doing cute things that are there to sort of comfort guys.
Right.
They're not really doing anything with their lives. You're just kind of watching these girls,
Be
like,
cute.
live their life. Yeah,
Yeah.
be cute, essentially. And so I feel like what this is doing is, like, in a way, it's kind of showing that crowd that girls can be a little bit more complicated than that. I mean, I hate to say it like that, but
Right.
like, they can kind of, they're exploring. Like, it's okay to feel conflict sometimes. Like, exploration is a good thing. But again, it's not 100% there, partially because I can't really draw a particular moral from this.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like that's what it could be, but it's definitely not what it is. And it's not
It's
what it's
definitely
even really trying to be.
right, and I mean, unfortunately, it's like, because we were really, really positive about this series,
And
like, up until last episode.
That's the thing. I still like the portrayal of ping pong. When they talk about ping pong, I'm all about it. It's all the other crap that goes with it that doesn't work.
Right. Yeah, no, I hear you. I hear you.
All right. So,
So I want to just say real
okay.
quick, we've been kind of going through this episode, and I think we have both been wanting to get to this point, which is, can we go on to Tiger Mask?
Oh my gosh, yes.
You know, a lot of times we're really excited to talk about Yuri on Ice or Haikyu or, you know, like one of the really big series. No, this week it's all about Tiger Mask.
Yeah, all right, so I'll try and just get through the summary, and there's a lot I'm gonna miss because there's a lot of weirdness here this week. Anyway, so
Okay.
start off, no real explanation, but Naoto is running on a beach with his tiger mask on for some reason, and then it immediately cuts to Miss X in America talking to Takuma and saying that if he wants to be the best, he can't just be strong, he also has to be beautiful. And then they have a photo shoot with Tiger the Dark. And then it cuts back to Japan, and a couple of low-voiced pop idols with twin pigtails are standing on the beach, and they see Tiger Mask, and they make fun of him. And then it cuts to the match, and there's a match where Ryu is fighting, and he does 64 rolling key locks on the ground, but then he gets tired and he falls down and he loses. And then it moves on without commenting on that to the same idols that you saw earlier in the episode are going to sing a song, but apparently they made a post on social media about how much pro wrestling sucks. So all the pro wrestling fangirls boo them and throw trash at the ring at them and chase them off the stage. And then a man jumps out from the side toward the side of the ring, and his name is Gorilla Jeet Singh, the Phantom
Can
of
you describe
Dubai.
this man, Matt?
Yeah, so he's a shirtless Middle Eastern man with a puffy afro and a headband, and he wields a scimitar, which is a long sword, and he runs into the ring, and he tries to attack the idols and the referee with his sword, with his
You left out
actual
the part where
sword.
he ate the roses.
Oh, thank you.
No problem.
So he's waving his sword at these two idols, and when they entered the ring, they brought a bouquet of roses, and he takes that bouquet and he consumes it. He just eats a bouquet of roses, and then he's swinging his sword. He's going to attack them, but in from the other side comes someone to defend them. Oh, it's a voice. Who is it? It's Tiger Mask, the man who is supposed to be fighting Singh anyway. So he jumps in, and he stops Singh from attacking them. The idols get off. Singh tries to attack the referee a lot, but Tiger Mask manages to wrench the sword out of his hands. Singh tries to get the sword back. He attacks the ref again, and then ultimately Singh pretends to give up. But turns out he doesn't give up. He just grabs Tiger Mask by the crotch and tries to throw him, and then he attacks the ref again. And then Tiger Mask ultimately dodges a flying knee from Gorilla Jeet Singh, and then he suplexes him for the win, and then Gorilla Jeet Singh threatens the referee again. After all that, these two pop idols come back on the stage, and the wrestlers introduce them, and everyone claps for them and screams their names and says how happy they are for them to be there for some reason. They all clap along, and then these pop idols sing about having good luck and how awesome their pigtails are. Then it cuts to Tiger Mask standing on the beach at night and staring into the moon while his manager Haruna comes up and talks about his merch with him, and he wonders whether his merch will sell or not. The end. That was
Okay.
it was a long summary because there's just so much weird stuff that happens. I didn't want to leave anything out.
Okay, so real quick, I just want to jump into this. I told you I did a little bit of research after I watched the episode, right?
Uh-huh.
So let me just give you a little context here. I was watching this episode, and I heard the voices of this pop idol group, right?
Yeah, so they're called, for the record, I didn't say it, they're called Nama Ham and Yaki Udon.
Yes. So I heard their voices. I don't generally notice voice actors in anime. It's kind of the reason why we don't really talk about acting in these at all, because, we don't understand the language.
Right.
But I heard their voices, and they sounded really weird.
Yeah, they had really low voices and they had kind of a weird accent.
Right. And I was thinking to myself, these people don't sound like anime voice actors.
Yeah.
So and then they did that whole pop idol song thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I looked them up. These girls are like a real idol group.
Wait, what?
Yeah, no, these girls, these are like real idols that exist.
Nama Ham and Yaki Udon are real people?
Yes, they are real people. I googled it. They are an actual pop idol group. Specifically, I think their hook is that they do comedy skits. Which is why they wrote, I think, that mean text about how they were tricked into it. Because I was really confused about why they would do that, but I think that's their thing.
Yeah, and they just invent random words. They described oh, why are you even here if you don't love wrestling? And the idols, they said, oh, it's just a jobby type thing. And I guess that's their
Yeah,
motif.
they do comedy skits and stuff like that. So, and I think that's kind of their image. So I think this episode was meant to be a promotion for this group.
That's so weird.
Right? I just I don't even know what to say. I was not expecting that.
Yeah. Okay, that puts a lot of things in perspective, because I'm like, who are these characters? Why do they have an idol group here? And why are they...
Right.
And the fact was that everyone was booing them and throwing trash at them, and then maybe 5 minutes later, they were all clapping along to their stupid song.
Right? I heard these people and it's just I didn't think that these were people who were actual voice actors, which is what I am. And they have such a weird design that
Mm-hmm.
but there's a lot. So yeah, what we were effectively watching here was basically a promotional episode that's there to they had a filler episode that so they had a filler episode.
Why not get
and
paid
so,
for it?
Yeah, exactly.
That's amazing.
That,
There's a lot of... I want to just go back and highlight a couple other weird things about this, if that's okay.
Oh, please, by all means. There's a lot to talk about.
Okay, so the first one was that Takuma appears very briefly in this episode. And I said it in the summary. All he does is have a conversation with Miss X, like he's getting a massage or something. And Miss X says that in order to be the best, you can't just be strong, you also have to be beautiful. And then he puts his Tiger the Dark outfit on, and he has a photo shoot. And they don't show the results from that photo shoot. They don't show anything about it. They just show him quietly standing, quietly listening to her while he gets a massage, and then quietly standing and getting a photo shoot. And that's it. That's the whole thing.
They didn't want to pay the voice actor to show up in this episode. This was a cost-cutting episode, and they couldn't pay all the voice actors.
That's amazing if true.
I think that's why.
I just don't understand what that had to do with anything, because it didn't link to anything later in the episode.
Right, I guess because they felt like they had to show Takuma because he is a main character.
Yeah, I guess.
But they didn't really have anything for him to do, so he's just off in America getting his pictures taken, and it's a nice scene that they can draw where he doesn't actually have to say anything.
Yeah, and I mean, well, I guess the other factor there might be that they need to include Miss X, because I don't remember the voice actress's name, but she's a veteran, and she's a pretty well-known voice actress.
I was reading about that.
Yeah, so I wonder whether she has a stipulation she has to be in every episode.
Oh, I'm guessing she has some sort of contract agreement like that, so they have to get out the actors who they can pay a little bit less, or they can kind of get around having in the episode.
Yeah, because that just made no sense, but it was beautiful. I do want to acknowledge again, I know, yeah, I didn't put it in when I was doing the summary, but it is very important, the fact that Gorilla Jeet Singh Which also, is he from Dubai? That's like not a very Arabic sounding name.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
do they know what weird stereotype were they depicting with this guy?
Okay, so I'm pretty sure they were trying to do a stereotypical Muslim. I do think that was their idea.
Yeah.
Okay, because I think Jeet in Japan is equivalent to how Americans use Muhammad, in the sense that like when you want to go with a generic like
Yeah.
Arabic name, you go with Muhammad. So and I
Uh,
because this is not the first stereotypical Arabic Jeet I've ever seen.
huh.
Because I've seen that in One Piece as well.
Huh.
And I think I've seen it one other place. So I don't know that for certain, but I think that's the idea. Um, and I thought when we were talking about the episode before we started this, you had made an interesting point about how like this feels like they were trying to be true to the spirit of like how wrestling is in Japan or really anywhere in the world where you have to have like the good hero like the good national hero versus like the evil foreigner.
Yeah.
It's still totally not cool though.
Right, exactly. So the most well known example is back from the '80s where we had Hulk Hogan, and
Right.
his rival, the Iron Sheik, who was a Muslim character, and he was evil and he hated
Right.
America, whatever. So they had like Soviet characters, and Hulk Hogan would fight them all to defend freedom and whatnot.
Right.
And so yeah, it does feel like it's playing on that, but also like why play with that?
Yeah, well, okay, so I thought they were going to redeem themselves at the very end of the episode when
Yeah,
they go to meet this guy, and it's like, okay, this is a guy who's playing a character. Except we live in a fantasy world where pro wrestling is actually like a legitimate thing where people die.
yeah, exactly.
And so, of course, he's not like the gag is, oh no, he's actually just this insane. And
Yeah.
it's like, okay, guys, come
They're
on,
like, oh
like,
no, we thought he was a nice gorilla. He's actually a crazy gorilla.
right? It's like, no, it's like we just thought this was like an act. Oh no, he's actually that insane.
Yeah, like, why?
It's like that's not cool, guys.
Yeah, so, and I mean, he does, to his immense credit, consume a bouquet of roses.
Right.
Like, he eats a
So,
bouquet of roses because that's just how crazy Gorilla Jeet Singh is. Um,
I just want to touch real quick as well that Ryu is slowly becoming my favorite
yes,
character.
that's the last thing I wanted to talk about.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Well, okay, so one of the things you mentioned about his whole like rolling on the ground thing. I mentioned this to you before. It's like this scene is portrayed like an actual wrestling match. Like not in the sense of pro wrestling or anything like that,
But,
but you
yeah.
turn on ESPN one day during the Olympics and you see that they're running the Olympic wrestling
Yeah,
matches.
Greco-Roman.
Yeah, the Greco-Roman. It took me so out of it because it's like this got weirdly real.
Yeah.
And
And so the one thing I want to say about it is that for some reason that they refuse to explain, Ryu is fighting his opponent and he like locks his legs around his opponent's arm and he sort of rolls and flips his opponent. And he does this 64 times.
times.
For some reason. And then after the 64th time, he stops rolling and he lies down and Ryu has his shoulders on the ground, so he gets counted out and he loses the match, even though he just rolled his opponent 64 times for some unknown reason. And they ask him, Ryu, are you okay? And he says, no, I am not okay. And then they cut away and don't acknowledge it again. like what? There's something about Ryu where he
I
just
mean, he's
gets the
still
crap
recovering
beat
from
out of
his
him.
face crushing.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like he broke his face, and
His face is broken, and yet he's fine.
they don't bring it
But
up.
not.
He just gets destroyed week after week, loses, and no one cares.
like, I just also want to mention real quick. So there's when they're doing the idol performance. Like you get the shots of the wrestlers and they don't care except for Ryu. He's the only one who's into this performance.
Yeah, yeah. Also, how are you okay? You just came off the mat and said that you weren't okay and didn't know
Okay, but now
why.
he's totally into their performance.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's
Ugh.
terrible. It's amazing. So Tiger Mask W, it's not a good show.
No.
But for what it is, it's kind of funny to see. I don't know. It's one of those where it's funny to see it fall apart, but it never really had it together.
Right. They pulled it together for like one episode with
Yeah.
Red Death Mask, and
Yes.
as I mentioned before, I think that's going to be the only like really like legitimately fun
Yeah.
episode.
Oh yeah. Episode 3 is a good episode, and that's it.
Yeah.
But this was kind of, or sorry, that was episode 4, and this was episode 6 for Tiger Mask. But anyway, so we'll move on and talk about All Out.
Yeah, go
Um,
for it, man.
All right, so they basically introduced at the beginning that this is going to be the training camp from hell episode, um, and so over a school break or something, they just Sekizan decides to have a training camp at the school itself, and so they're going, they're starting this training camp, and then this old man walks onto the pitch and starts criticizing them, and they're like, oh, who's this old man? It's a guy named Shingo, who is a retired rugby player for the Japanese national team. And then he's like, where's Gion? And then Gion's like, oh, hey, it's that guy I invited to come. And they're like, wait, what? He's like, well, they said that they needed more support, so I just Googled rugby coach and clicked the first name and told him to come here. Um, and they're kind of confused by this old man who's telling them how much they suck at rugby. But he gives them some interesting advice, and he talks to Sekizan about how much Sekizan has to learn, and Sekizan is sort of intrigued by this. So they allow Shingo to give them some coaching. He divides them into teams of 2 versus 2 to show them how technique can beat strength in like a confined space, and they have a little rugby game that they play, and then he tells Sekizan that all of his players are so tired and he's overworking them, so they need to eat and sleep. So they go take a nap. Then they come back in the afternoon, and Shingo has strung metal wires and poles across the entire field in order to teach them how to stay low and pass low. So they have to run through these wires to pass. And then they work on some scrums, and Oharano has some character development, kind of. And at the end, Sekizan asks Shingo to come back and coach them again the next day.
Right. Okay, so I was not as enthusiastic about this episode as you were when we were talking about it earlier.
Yeah.
But I did like it. I do feel like this series is making the very slow improvements that it needs.
Yeah, it started off so bad.
Yeah, it really... Oh, not even, like, terrible, just very blah.
Oh, yeah, sure.
But, I feel like this is starting to make a lot more of the adjustments that it needs to be a bit more of an interesting series.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a little mixed on how they introduce this coach, just on the basis that he just kind of feels... It's like, okay, he shows up, they have a new coach.
Yeah,
It's kind of funny how they
It was very lazy.
It was very lazy, as opposed to like something like Haikyu, where they have to go through this whole process to get Ukai to finally convince him.
Yeah, and Shingo has no connection to the school. It is, I mean, I laughed at the thought that Gion just Googled rugby coach and clicked the first name he saw, but it was lazy.
It's very lazy, but I appreciate that they made a joke out of it.
Yeah.
And that they're aware, yeah, this is a little lazy, what are you gonna do? Like, that's a very real way to get a coach, though.
Yeah.
Which is the funny thing.
Yeah.
What I really appreciated, though, was the way that the coach actually made Sekizan a much more interesting character than he's been portrayed up till now.
Yeah, true.
Which is the whole thing about, like, Sekizan has always... There's this very reoccurring trope in a lot of sports anime, and not necessarily a bad one, but it's essentially this whole trope of the wise senior member who's basically always right.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, the way... He's this very experienced... He's basically this person he's already made this journey to, like, where he is now, and he's trying to impart his knowledge upon the rest of the team. Mm-hmm. And they can do and that's not necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah.
Sekizan was a very boring interpretation of this character.
Yeah, like the character who has nothing to learn about the sport.
Right. Like, but what I thought was really interesting about this was the fact that he's basically too wrapped up in his own methods of training to see that it doesn't work for everybody else.
Right.
which was the interesting thing of that this coach introduced to Sekizan. He's like, look, do you even see your players? They're not like they're tired, they're exhausted. You need to let them rest.
Yeah, not everyone can keep up. Just because you can practice for 4 hours straight doesn't mean everyone can, and you're actually
Yeah, exactly.
basically he said you're going to burn people out and they're all going to quit and it's going to be your fault. And Sekizan hadn't even realized that.
Right.
I liked that a lot too. That um, he also brought up the fact that Sekizan only started playing rugby in high school. So
Right.
his inexperience meant that he also didn't know how to coach, and he was just doing what worked for him. That was sort of part of why, is that he didn't really know how to be a leader.
Yeah, exactly. And it's nice to see that, hey, you know what? We're going to start seeing this sort of mentor, this wise third year character actually have to develop himself.
Yeah, it's hilarious to think. It's funny to see because Sekizan initially came off as sort of like you said, he's this perfect character who's perfect at rugby and he's infinitely strong and he's infinitely confident. But then in this episode he's like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like he
Right.
just sort of finally realized he didn't know what he was doing in leading
Right.
this team. He needed help. He desperately needed someone to tell him how to coach a rugby team, and he was just so happy that someone else could teach him. So that, and I don't know, that was fun to see.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm totally down with that. The other thing I did notice about this episode as well was that so Haikyu was kind of fulfilling our need for an anime or a sports anime with like really like visceral, like really like intense hits. Like that are still like pretty naturally portrayed. Yuri on Ice is kind of fulfilling this whole like this sort of beautiful, graceful,
Mm,
so like this very fluid style that's very satisfying to see. All Out is starting to grow into its own with the animation in a very different way. In that starting to see a lot more like really exaggerated movements that are really satisfying to watch play out.
like what?
Oh, Gion's I want to call it a headbutt, but it was really more of a
Oh
feint.
yes.
So I really like. So there's a way he just lean. Like we don't just get him sort of leaning back and butting the ball. No, we get to see him like fling his body back and like with the sheer raw force of this ball.
Mm-hmm.
And it's fun to watch this sort of style. Just this whole like exaggerated movements. Like this is clearly not like a realistic way in which they would probably do this motion, but it's still way more fun to watch.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that was a fun scene. I mean, Guion doesn't do much in this episode, but he's kind of
Right.
fun where
Which
he
is
does show up.
which is also kind of why I've not been as into this episode as you were, just on the basis that I wish they were focusing a little bit more on Gion, because I feel like they're starting to focus a little bit too much on the team as a whole, and I don't feel like we really have a solid basis of somebody to follow.
Yeah.
Like we don't really have our underdog that we're really rooting for in this team. So like for example, in Ace of the Diamond, that would be Sawamura,
Right.
for example, because that's a series that's very much based around the team,
Yeah.
but we get introduced to it through Sawamura. Whereas All Out, like we kind of have that in Gion, but the series even made a joke in its first episode about it's like, oh, you'll learn more about these characters later. We're not going to bother introducing them now.
Yeah.
But it's like, I would really like to learn a lot more about who our central character is, and I feel like it just doesn't have a focus.
That's true. The last thing I want to say about All Out is that I like about it is that at the beginning I was worried it was going to take the tack of Days, where the only thing you had to do to be good at rugby was just keep training and just keep exercising. You know, the same way that it looked at the beginning, like the way Guion was going to become great at rugby was by doing bear crawls for 3 hours a day, which made me worry that it was just going to advocate for ceaseless exertion,
Right.
which, you know, is not the healthiest thing for young bodies to do. Um, and this episode really undermined that. He sort of, the coach said to Sekizan, like, are you serious? You just have them exercising without actually learning any technique. You're just trying to have them hit each other over and over and over and over without learning the technique or strategy for how to play rugby. Do you really think you're going to learn like that? Do you think anyone's going to be healthier for that? Like, you are going to make everyone quit or burn out, and then you'll lose. And so I liked that they set up the team as Sekizan being this ruthless taskmaster who just advocated physical labor and training, and then in the 5th episode undermined it and said that was stupid.
Right. So and I can appreciate that at the very least.
Yeah. I just thought it was an unusual approach, and I appreciated it.
Yeah.
So, go ahead.
So, yeah, I feel like this is, like, we're seeing a lot more anime now, or a lot more sports anime, that are kind of going against what was traditional for sports anime. Where, you know, the whole idea, it's like, you just gotta keep training until you're bleeding and don't have anything left.
Yeah.
And then, but I feel like we're getting a lot more series now that are basically like, whoa now, hold up, that's actually not healthy.
Yeah, and we talked about this before with Battery, and I think, obviously, the more you can get that message out there, the better.
Right.
We're totally gonna run out of time, so I'm just gonna skip to Days, and we'll be sort of short on these last few.
You're right.
So Days episode 6. This is the end of the match against Seikon. Himura on Seikon says that he is going to avenge his defeat in the first half. The coach of Seikon wants to add another forward to support him because apparently Himura plays by himself as forward. Tyra says that he'll quit the team if they substitute another forward in. Okay. Then Himura immediately has 2 miracle goals. He takes the lead. Then they have a flashback for Kimishita, who remembers playing as a rookie with Mizuki and passing to him, and how good he used to be, but now he's doubting himself because he's not good, and he thinks Mizuki doesn't trust him. But then it turns out that when Mizuki said he didn't like Kimishita's passes, it was just because Mizuki's an idiot. And when he said he wasn't satisfied with Kimishita's passes, it's because he's not satisfied with anything and he always wants to improve. So then they're like, oh, I guess we're a team again. And they're able to succeed. And ultimately it ends up where Tsukamoto has an opportunity for an open goal because of Kimishita's supportive, loving passes. But he can't make the shot because he's afraid of missing. So then Kazuma is broken out of his anger, basically by Ubukata, and told that he needs to support his friend because he's lonely without him. And so Kazuma goes around and tells Tsukamoto that he can shoot and he should shoot. So then Tsukamoto does shoot and he scores a goal and they win and they're friends again. The end.
Yeah, so I just want to address a couple things, and then we can move on to Keijo. So we still don't know why Jin was upset.
Yeah, it's never like it's something to do with his mother and wanting to play in front of her, but it's never actually explained. Of course.
Right. And it's just like I was actually kind of hoping for like a falling out between Tsukamoto and Kazuma, and I know that was like silly to hope something of this series, right? But you know, I really felt like Tsukamoto was actually trying to sacrifice something for the good of the team.
Yeah.
Like he had this character development of I have to be willing to have that hunger.
Mm-hmm.
And so, he's going to give up his best friend, Jin. And it's like, okay, I thought they were going to try and establish something there. No, never mind. Jin's cool with it.
Yeah, exactly. Like
Tsukamoto's lonely. Jin realizes that. Yeah, so yeah, not good. It's not great. There's one other thing I wanted to address, which was there is no sense of where anyone is and where the ball is going at any time.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
I mean, we talk a lot about the poor animation in this, just in regards to still frames. But there are times when characters are shooting, where you see shots of characters shooting the ball, and it's nowhere near where they actually were in the original shot.
Yeah, the soccer doesn't make sense. It's just about develop. I mean, there's nothing you can say about this stupid show to defend the soccer. The one thing I wanted to point to is there was a quote at one point with Kimishita, referring to Mizuki, where he says, "I don't need to put a name on the way I feel about you. I just want to be the one to enable you." Which
Yeah,
felt like, since when is this a pairing? Like, what,
right.
this is supposed to be this angry character who's never satisfied with his forwards, but like, oh no, like he really treasures his friendship with Mizuki suddenly. Okay.
Right.
And also, if you want to interpret that some other way, go ahead. It very much mirrored the kind of language that Yuri used coincidentally.
Right.
Um, in Yuri on Ice, where he said, "I don't want to put a name on I don't want to put a name on this feeling." But then Yuri says, "I guess it's love," and Kimishita says, "I just want to support you, man." So it's total yaoi baiting, where they're trying to
Right.
make you care about these pairings, but they don't actually want to put in the effort to justify them.
Right. Not like Yuri, where they actually like build up that
Yeah,
relationship.
exactly. This is random. Like, it's hilarious that every single episode of Days we say, where did this character motivation come from? This has never come up before.
Yeah.
But we should stop being surprised.
I know, but I can't help it because I keep hoping that it's going to turn it around, and it never
I
does.
know. All right, do you want to briefly discuss Keijo?
Okay, so Keijo Nozomi has her match against the elite class. She wins. End of story. Okay, so I'll go a little bit more into it. So she has her match. This girl basically is super like detached from the matches because her mother was a prize queen, which is basically the term they use for like a champion.
Weird term.
Um, yeah, I know. It's almost as if though they are trying to draw the connection between women and horses.
Oh no.
Yeah. So anyway, so she basically does not concentrate on her matches at all. She has her technique, which she refers to as Cerberus, where her butt moves basically independent from the rest of her body. Um, and so she can basically attack at super high speeds just by like her butt moving around on the ring while she fantasizes about boys' love. This is established.
Oh no.
So because she is super into boys' love, this is also the first time we have ever seen any guys in the series. Because she is just because she is like watching an anime where two dudes are kissing.
It's
Like, and
weird to
yes,
bring it into like a female fan service show aimed at guys to have actual yaoi in the
yeah,
show.
like to have like actual like yaoi where you actually see like the dudes making out.
Okay, that's an interesting
Anyway,
choice.
right. Anyway, so eventually, Nozomi is able to make because she's really irritated that this elite. Her name is Fujisaki, by the way. I didn't mention that. She is very frustrated by the fact that she doesn't care about the sport of Keijo.
Right.
And so she wants to make her like her goal in this match is to make her pay attention to Nozomi rather than just treat her like any other fighter. So as Cerberus is coming towards her, she blocks Cerberus and starts using something called Vibe Ring Hip.
Uh,
Yeah, you can kind of see where this is going. So they're in a butt lock, and Nozomi is basically wiggling her hips, her butt super fast to make her opponent orgasm.
oh no, no. Wait, what? Really?
Well, okay, so that's not actually what happens, but that's what happens. What's actually because one of the characters mentions that she's very sensitive down south, or south of the border. However, what she was actually referring to was the fact that her feet are very sensitive and she can feel slight vibrations in the land, which is the sort of ring that they fight on,
Okay.
and that she's very sensitive to the vibrations
But
that
like
are emitted,
Nozomi
which is
just
how she.
misinterprets it.
So the series is basically trying to it's trying to justify the fan service here.
Right.
Like, oh no, she's not actually orgasming. She's very sensitive to the vibrations that are occurring like around her feet.
Okay.
Even yeah, so even though it's obvious what's going on here.
Okay, so the visual cues are all for that, but they justify it's like, no, it's just her feet. It's not her
Yeah,
butt.
it's just her feet.
Okay.
Okay, so
Interesting.
there is one. So to counter this, the first time, so because of this, she now finally actually has to face Nozomi for the first time. Admittedly, there is an amazing pun here with the attack she uses by the Shore Yukans, which is she pops up to whack her opponent as if it were an uppercut, but she hits her in the face with the boobs.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay.
Yeah, right. Yeah, okay. I'm gonna give him credit for that one. That is an amazing pun.
I don't know if it's amazing, but it is funny though.
It's a good one. It's a good one.
All right, so any final thoughts on this episode of Keijo?
Oh, so real quick, I haven't finished the match here.
Oh,
So
sorry.
Nozomi, basically, they kind of get into their final conflict. Nozomi is powering up her vacuum butt cannon.
Classic, yeah.
And she misses with it at first, and then she starts building it up, whereas Cerberus is chasing her around the ring as she's powering up her butt cannon, which she does by sequentially doing a bunch of flips in a row.
Okay.
That's how she builds up her momentum for it, right? And so Nozomi, however, has more time to build this up because, like, the Cerberus is basically just autopilot. She's just chasing, whereas the more she flips around, the more and more power she's building up in her butt. And so this, when they finally clash at the very end, Fujisaki loses. So then the very final thing we learn is that Alba is about to leave because she's the only one who lost her match, and she didn't think she was going to be able to stay at the university because of it. However, you find out that they actually allowed her to pass because apparently her opponent using the boob hypnosis was actually not allowed.
Sure. Why not?
Sure. So yeah, basically. And they were very impressed with the way they had managed to corner her into using this technique.
Okay.
So they've allowed Alba to move up as well.
Whatever.
And that's the end of the episode.
All right, so Long Riders.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk about.
I kind of got my
Keijo.
observations in there.
I don't care. Yeah. I'm not watching it. All right, so Long Riders episode 4. So the girls get together to talk about how Amy wants another bike, maybe. And then Amy's like, oh, bikes are expensive. I guess I should get a job. She already has a job, but she needs to get a second job. She's not sure what job she's going to get, but then she finds one, but you don't know what it is yet. Then they go and talk to Hinako, who describes how she has another job too, but she won't tell them what it is either. Turns out she works at her parents' Chinese restaurant, and she dresses in a cheongsam, which is basically just a Chinese dress, and a bunch of men ogle her and tell her how cute she is, and then she hits them in the face, and they say, oh, thank you, can you hit me in the face too, because she's such a tsundere, and it's terrible. And then everyone gets worried that Amy is actually working at a hostess club to get money for her bike, so they secretly follow her, but it's not a hostess club. Surprise, it's a maid cafe, because of course it is. And so Amy is working at this maid cafe, and it turns out that she's really clumsy, but her clumsiness makes her really appealing to their clientele who love a clumsy maid, and she's cute, and every time she does something, she blushes, and then all the men start requesting the extra blushing option for their meal, and then all the girls are relieved that Amy isn't a prostitute, haha, and they decide to work hard and bike together. The end.
Right. So, real quick, I just wanted to point out something. Something that caught my eye about the episode. So the love spell she casts on the guy's food, that wasn't just like anime fetishy. Like, I've been to a maid club when I went to Japan a couple years back.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's something they actually do.
Yeah.
Like, I had to perform that spell.
Oh.
Like, I think it was like that spell.
Huh.
So yeah, go to Akihabara. So this is advertising. Hey guys, go to Akihabara. Go to a maid club. You can do this. Like, look how cute these girls are. At the end.
Yeah, I mean, this damn show. That's all I had to say is that, like, it was so, I don't know. I was into it the first 2 episodes, but now it's not about bikes anymore. It's just about the girls hanging out and having really boring, uncomplicated interactions and being cute and dressing up in cute outfits, and don't you want to take a screen cap of this, boys? Like, it feels like it went straight to the lowest common denominator.
So it's really funny because it seems like basically this show and Scorching Ping Pong Girls, they ended up being the opposite of what we expected of both of them.
Yeah, I guess. What do you mean?
Oh, just on the sense that we were kind of expecting Long Riders to have like a lot of Yuri subtext and not really be and like have a little bit more in depth about biking, whereas Scorching Ping Pong Girls was going to be like the super pandering one, and it turned out to be the opposite.
Yeah, you're right. They're both still kind of so.
I just wanted to point out one thing. Bikes are super expensive in Japan. Like 86,000 yen for this road bike she's going to pay for. That it's 45% off. That in US dollars, that's $860.
Yeah, and that's at a discount. So
yeah, that's like at like almost half price.
Yeah, so for a not superior bike in Japan, it would be like what, 17 $1,500. That is
right?
crazy.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, so no wonder she has to work at a maid cafe. But gosh, all the ogling in this episode was just freaking ridiculous. Oh man,
Yeah.
it's just
I
like
mean, how terrible are Hinako's parents to make her like dress up in a China dress
yeah,
just
and
to draw in these customers to ogle her? It's just like great job for your daughter's self-esteem there, guys.
yeah, real weird. And also they got her a bunny costume. Of course, this stupid show will have and like the parallels with Scorching Ping Pong Girls. Again, they dress up like bunnies, they dress up like maids. Screw this, man. All right, I don't know. There's no meat here. It's boring. It sucks. It's cheap. They're running out of money, and they're just trying to do anything they can to save their budget and appeal to otaku, and somehow break even. This show sucks. So on that note, do you have any closing remarks? I think we're about to wrap up.
Yeah, I'm good.
All right. Do you want to hit the credits for me then?
Our logo design is by James Ratcliffe. The theme music is Fly High by Burnout Syndromes, covered and performed by Luke Bartka. You can follow KoshienCast on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, and our email is koshiencast@gmail.com. Make sure to subscribe, rate, and review. We will be back next week with the best and worst from the world of sports anime, and until then, keep training.